This is my little contribution to this literature, together with Aldo Rostichini, another important theorist from the University of Minnesota. What we are going to explore is essentially behavior, but behavior using two elements. One is the happiness, life satisfaction report, and the second is individual personality. We bridge together this literature, and from the conclusion, we start to infer something about individual behavior, which is impossible to infer with usual economics tools. Let's give you an overview of the main idea. We study the issue of happiness, how happiness or life satisfaction react or correlates with income. It is well known already that personality traits affect the level of life satisfaction or happiness. Some personalities are more keen to depression, so low happiness. We find, this is the finding of the paper, the study of the research, that personality traits influence income, and the way happiness depends on income. The elasticity of the way our life satisfaction reacts to income is mediated by our personality. It's very different from people to people and depends on individual personality. Especially with this word, you are going to hear this word quite often, neuroticism. Right? Neuroticism is associated with a decline of happiness at high income. In general, neuroticism is the trait, the personality trait that mediates the relation between life satisfaction and income. Is the one who is the most clearly responsible in the way we enjoy money. And we found that higher neuroticism is associated with that decline in happiness at high income, decline in the sense not growing too much or being steady, but it's associated with an increase in happiness at low income. Okay? What we find is that neurotic people, there is an overview, we'll go a bit deeper in it later. Neurotic people react in a strange way. More neurotic people react in a quite strange way to income. If they are poor, they overreact. Their life satisfaction increase quite a lot. If they are already rich, they seem not to react too much. Okay? So, but is neuroticism the main responsible of our relationship with money? Still, I'm giving you an overview. How we made sense of this. The model, try to build a model, an economic model, to understand why this statistical association, correlation was true. And we used the personality trait theory. Openness, extraversion, and conscientiousness provides motivation. I will be a bit more clear what all these words are later. Provide motivation. This is any psychologist would agree with that, I guess. Which motivation increase aspiration, and hence income. The more I aspire, the more likely that I'm getting richer, right? But with higher aspiration, higher gap is possible. Why? Because if I am aspiring too much, it might be that I'm not achieving what I want. It might be that I achieve still more than what people with less aspiration achieves, not as much as I want. The higher are my aspiration, the lower is the probability of achieving that. So it's an assumption, okay? Okay, so this is our model. We build on this model. Now, higher disappointment when I'm aspiring too much. I am rich because I'm ambitious. I'm rich, but I'm aspiring too much. The difference between aspiration and income might be very big. This difference, according to personality trait here, is likely to be mediated by neuroticism. The more neurotic I am, the more I suffer the gap between achieved and aspired. Okay? And that's where neuroticism comes from. This is our model to make sense of our result. So the gap between aspiration and income increases with income, and it's positive. So given this model, the gap between aspiration and income increases with income, and it's positive for lower income and negative for higher income. What does it mean? Given this model and given our statistical result, this must be true. What is that? What does it mean? It means that if I aspire very little, I might overshoot. I'm likely to overshoot, to get richer than what I expect. If I aspire very high, I'm likely to undershoot. Okay? So, what happens? It happens that a highly motivated, highly ambitious person is likely to undershoot. Therefore, if he's highly neurotic, will suffer. Instead, a low motivated person, which is likely to overshoot, he thinks to earn £20,000 a year, it turns out to earn £25,000 a year, he's very happy, because this gap is positive. So the more neurotic he is, the happier he is. Okay? That's the way we made sense, building an economic model, okay? An economic model, and using the data. This is the way we made sense of this is a result, okay? A mathematical result from the model. Poor tend to overshoot on their aspiration. Rich tend to undershoot. A bit controversial, but if we consider exactly our definition, it might be quite intuitive. So, therefore, when somebody is very rich, is somebody who is likely to be, he wanted to be even richer, so doesn't really enjoy the wealth. Because he said, oh, I wanted to be rich, although I'm still rich. So that's why you might have this effect of leveling down happiness, or even maybe declining for very rich people. Okay? So these are the main ideas. I will be a bit more specific now. Give you a bit of background, empirical findings. I will specify a bit more the simple model and give you some conclusion. Let me introduce you to the magnificent, wonderful world of personality traits. I don't know if there are psychologists here. If there are, I'm sorry, I will be a bit basic on that description. Openness and intellect, the first trait, is the inclination and ability to search and process information. Some people put together IQ and openness. What does it mean that? In economics terms? Well, somebody very open is somebody exploring, maybe exploring new opportunity of producing or new technology. Okay? An open person is likely to be an innovator, somebody who studies and try to learn how to produce better or with more efficiency. Conscientiousness, the tendency to be organized, self-disciplined, orderly. An economist would say somebody extremely focused on short-term outcome. Okay? It's very focused on the details. He wants that something is perfect. He maybe will lose the main picture, stay close as possible to the details, to the short-term outcome. Okay? Another important, from an economic point of view, variable. Extraversion, tendency to seek and enjoy positive rewards, particularly in social interaction. An economist can define this as a sensitivity or elasticity to reward, to positive reward. If you know what is about, if you know what is a model of principal agent, okay, contract theory, you might think of extraversion as the elasticity to the carrot. neuroticism, finally, which is agreeableness, sorry, tendency to altruism, and cooperation. Agreeableness is the most human trait. We share this personality trait with other animals. Agreeableness is the one who is most associated with human being, and is the normally associated with our upper part of our brain, which is the one who is the most developed among human beings. Finally, this is perhaps the one we need to focus the most, is neuroticism, which is a bit the opposite of extraversion. An economist could define this as a loss aversion. If you're highly neurotic, you're afraid of making loss, of losing, so of being disappointed, because you know you punish yourself quite a lot if you don't achieve what you want. Loss aversion. Okay? So these are the traits. As you see, I gave a bit of an economic cut to the description to show you how relevant they are from an economic perspective. Let me convince you a bit which this personality trait means something. I guess psychologists are already convinced. Economists, I'm sure they will raise their eyebrow. So I'm giving you a bit of argument why we have to take them seriously. Personality traits are relatively stable pattern. If you regress personality with age, you will have a significant sign, but a very small one. Okay, age explains very little about our personality. Clearly, it changes with age, but marginally. There are some genetic studies based on twin data, and they try to separate the genetic component from the environment, from the idiosyncratic component. What is interesting for everybody is that the genetic component. Because if you get to show that traits are genetic, that means that they are stable. In economics terms, you can safely consider them exogenous, right? It's very interesting. Okay, that's the point. Now, clearly when you put the twin data, you have a genetic component playing, the shared environment, and then idiosyncratic, completely random, nature element. Well, clearly heritability is the genetic bit. Geneticists have studied this problem already in the 90s, and they found that personality traits are heritable about 50%. 10% is the environment, 40% is nature, randomness. How they managed to do that? They were not naive. Economists might think that those people have been naive because we think that we know the concept of, we invented the concept of identification, which is not true, because they knew very well this concept already in the 90s. And how did they identify the genetic component? Well, in a very clever way, using the randomness between being monozygotic and diazygotic. Actually, I know Peter, he's a twin. Are you? No, you're not.
Twin brothers.
Okay, fine. Okay, whatever. So monozygotic and autozygotic, that's a random event. Okay, so you take all the twin. The random event is the fact of being monozygotic and autozygotic, and you assume, which is rather strong assumption, but not bad, the rest is the same. So the environment is the same whether you are monodiiotic team, or diazygotic team, twin. Okay, that's the assumption. Therefore, the only difference is due to the fact that you are monozygotic or diazygotic, and this is the completely random. Therefore, using this randomness, you can identify the effect of heritability. which is the 50% we are talking about. Okay? So there is good reason to think there is, yeah?
Can you give an example of an idiosyncratic component? I don't quite understand.
Randomness, completely.
Environment.
Huh?
Like how does that differ to environment? Like how is that defined?
Shared environment is the environment that you live, your parents, you live, two twins, yeah.
Your built environment, or does that also come under environment, or is the built environment in the idiosyncratic?
You know, let's take twins. Twins, the shared environment is the environment they live, everyday life. Okay? This is, so they are people like this because they share that environment. They had the parents, they had the social connection, they lived in a house, they lived in a city. Okay, that's the idiosyncratic component is completely random. Is what else you cannot explain by okay, let's take this. Everything you cannot explain by using genetic and environment, everything is left is idiosyncratic. It's in nature.
40%.
It's very high.
A chunk of totally unexplained things.
Yes, it's very high. Yeah, it's 50. But I will look more at 50% of genetic. Okay, I will look more at that. But obviously, there is a big element of randomness. Okay, sure. This is something coming out from Aldo's studies. Personality trait and economic preferences, namely risk attitudes or preference toward time, if you regress them with economic outcomes, like income or whatever, they seem to correlate. They both correlate, of course, but the coefficient, okay, the magnitude of correlation is not that different. So if economists consider risk attitude and preference toward time as variable, there is no reason to leave personality traits outside. This is the way is measured in the two data sets we have used. Socioeconomic panel, British household panel. It's a very simple, it's a very small one, 15 questions. It comes out from a bigger one of 46 questions, which comes out from a very big one of 250 questions. The more and more psychologists realize that even a small amount of question could do the job. Now, this is 15 questions, it's very small, and normally is used when you have a huge data set, like the one we are using, okay? Like for 6,000-7,000 people. There is likely to be, it's okay using such a small question. Clearly, you know, it's a big number, so there is going to be a big noise. Economists I know, I mean, I'm an economist and can be skeptical about the fact of measuring things by questioning. Okay. I understand, I'm an economist. However, I want to say something. Psychologists tend to agree. Huh? You know, psychology, among psychologists, there is much more conflictuality than among economists. Okay? So if there is something in which they agree, it must be something convincing. Okay. And I have to say that up to now, okay, there is disagreement among psychologists on the importance of personality traits, but generally speaking, most of the psychologists would agree that this is a fair way to measure personality. Just a bit of overview on the literature, which is pretty growing. Life satisfaction and income. Life satisfaction or happiness, like Peter mentioned before, is defined by answer to survey question. Okay? In cross-sectional, normally you see a linear regression of happiness on income, personal income, produce a positive significant but small coefficient. Okay? This is the result which has been 2004. You have something which looks like positive although small. Recently, on the proceeding of the National Academy of Science, Kahneman and Newton show that seems to get flat at $75,000 per year. After that, you cannot become happier.
In the US?
In the US, yeah, we're talking about US, and we'll talk about $2,005. There is some disagreement on that point, okay? But, this is more or less. Then there is the famous Esterlin paradox. If you look time series, you aggregate, like Peter did, and you take the same country over a long period of a year, for example, United States, from 60 when this measurement started up to 90, 2000, what you see is nothing, flat. Okay? You don't see any improvement in the aggregate measure of life satisfaction. This is called Esterlin paradox because in spite of the fact that the United States grew massively in this period, you don't see any improvement on life satisfaction report. This is true also for basically all European countries, apart Italy. Italy, there is a slight positive trend, in my view. I mean, this probably depends on the fact that in the 60s, Italy was still an underdeveloped country, okay, before the industrial boom in Italy happened in the beginning of the 70s. And maybe in Japan, recently, somebody found a gently positive trend. But generally speaking, for the United States, that's deadly flat. Okay? This is more or less an extremely very, very short, probably not complete description of this literature. Let's see how life satisfaction, personality, and income interact. What is known? Well, it's known that the personality traits correlate with the level of life satisfaction. This is well known. Neurotic tend to be unhappy. The more neurotic you are, the unhappier you are. Okay? Extrovert seems to, let's put in a better way. Neurotic tend to declare low level of life satisfaction. Extrovert tend to declare high level of life satisfaction, for example. Okay? Open is a bit ham-shaped. If you are too open, you might be a bit sad. An extremely open person is an artist, for example, because he has very strong capacity of looking in abstract terms. What is not known up to now is that how personality traits influence the way in which income affect happiness, how this mediate. And what is not known, but that's a bit too strong perhaps, and how personality traits correlate with income. But we'll see these two things now. Okay, these are the data I'm going to use. UK panel, 96-2008, where the question of life satisfaction has been introduced. And this is German panel, 84-2009. How this panel is built? Well, you started with a group of 3,000-4,000 people. And the question is household based. So if you leave the household, the new household become part of the question. Okay, so then I started, I think, with 3,000 people, and then it grew more and more. Now, both questionnaire, I think it's about 7,000 people, 7,000 observations. What you can see here, well, something interesting already from that, you can see that UK and German seems to have a similar personality. German and Brits do not change very much in terms of personality. Not surprising, human beings tend to be very similar. So, let me go on the first main result. Okay? What is this? Here we have our life satisfaction. Okay? Here we have our income. We pulled all data together, and we take the residuals after controlling for gender and age. We try to depurate that element from it. This line measures the relationship of income to life satisfaction for 10% most neurotic people in the population. This is for the 10% least neurotic people in the population. Okay? And we did the same thing for Germany. What we can see. Neurotic people seems to be more, the relationship between income and life satisfaction for neurotic people, which is the bold line, repeat, seems to be more concave. Okay, seems to be more concave. Here has a slope bigger than non-neurotic. Here a slope that seems to decline and become smaller than non-neurotic. And interestingly enough, the two pictures are not that different. Not that different if you consider that in Germany, life satisfaction is measured up to 10, from 1 to 10, while in the UK is measured from 1 to 6. Okay, there are two different measures. So in spite of this difference, the two graphs seems to be remarkably qualitatively similar. Maybe you can say, okay, yes, it's true for all traits. It's just a way people express themselves, okay? Could be true. Then we use the other trait as a way placebo. Okay? Here. You see, the two lines do not seem, here we also have low neurotic, high neurotic, okay? In most of the case, the two lines overlap. There is not a clear, statistically relevant difference between the two. And more interestingly, you might have something different here and here, but you see in the other one, in the Brits, you don't have it. Nothing looks like that. You agree with me? Visually. Visually, it seems that we are capturing a pattern which is only peculiar to neuroticism. Okay? This is the first evidence. I'm going even farther now. I'm presenting you that table. Now, I'm sorry, probably you are not able to see that. You have to believe what I'm saying. Why we had to do this table? We did this table because we used the longitudinal nature of the data set. The fact that the same individual is pictured different years, so that we can control for individual effect. Okay, that's a strong control. So you allow people to be different in principle in the model. That's a strong control. Instead of pulling together the data, we are controlling for individual effect. We allow an individual to be different, to declare life satisfaction in his own way. Doesn't matter how. What is important is that he's consistent across here. Well, look at that. Neuroticism, you see these are the little stars, this is neuroticism time income, is consistently in both data sets significant, both in its linear and in its quadratic component. We have seen this already before, graphically. Now we've seen this in this table with the control for individual effects. First. Second, look at that. The other traits interacted. This is significant, but it's not significant in the UK. This is significant in the UK, but not. It's clearly that the neuroticism seems to be the trait, the personality trait that determines somehow our relationship with money.
Sorry, you've got one measure of personality and time-varying income?
Yes, yeah. It's fixed. Actually, the personality has been measured in 2006. But for many cases, all this data go up to 80. So a person whose personality was measured in the 70, when he is 70, for example, the income of this person is when he was 30. Okay, it's even stronger, you know, result. Yeah.
There's another question. You said that the way they define their life satisfaction is consistent. What does that mean? You assume that they have the same relationship between money and life satisfaction across the years?
We are assuming that each individual has the same relationship the model is the
What's
same.
the time period that you got there?
We have 84 2009 for Germany and 96 2008. Okay, so my relationship with money will not change. Will only depend on my personality. Okay, will not change with age. Okay, that's the assumption of this model. But hold on, here we cope with this problem you're talking about. Okay, we take away the effect of age from the data. Okay. So these are residuals. Okay, this graph copes with what you are talking about. Okay. Now, second point, which is very important. Okay, first point, the stars everywhere. Second point, lack of star here. Third point, which is remarkable. If you consider neuroticism, our relationship with money is 0. Only neuroticism. You see, there are no stars here or here, a bit some here, but here the relationship is the other way around. That's minus, that's plus. Our observed concavity, okay, of economists. Economists assume income is concave in utility, okay? So it derives from
utility
concave in income, sorry. It is derived by our utility concept of utility and everything. But you know, that's concavity, which is a milestone in the revealed preference paradigm, is completely mediated by neuroticism, okay? I think these are results that need to be studied. It might not be true, it might just be an artifact of the fact that we are not measuring completely everything. Could be true. But if it is true, I mean, there is a lot to work on that. Because our concavity, our relationship with goods, might be just dependent from our level of neuroticism. You know, it's a strong result. Okay, it might be false, but if it's true, it's quite strong.
So it's all driven by neurotic people?
Neuroticism. I'll come back on that. Now I will skip this income and personal. I will skip this gender difference, just to say that, generally speaking, this result is indifferent by the fact that you control for gender or not. I don't want to enter too much on this, otherwise I will not be able to be on time. And I want to introduce to the fantastic world of neuroticism a bit more. Neuroticism is linked to sensitivity to negative emotions, like anger, hostility, and depression. If you're very sensitive, you are highly neurotic. From a neuroscience point of view, highly neurotic people tend to be associated, tend to light very, very much the area associated with sensitivity to threat and punishment. Okay. If you put a guy in the MRI scan, okay, if you threat him, there is something going on in his brain, and you can see that. You can see the lights. Neurotic, you see more lights. Okay, just to say a bit, to be a bit more clear.
Just brief comment on that study looked at structural MRI, wasn't functional MRI, so it's actually the size of that region of the brain. So there's no flashing lights.
Not flashing lights. No.
It's how big it was.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, okay. Sorry, but it was funnier to say that this way. You might be right. Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks for that. Neuroticism is also associated with sensitive negative outcome, threat and punishment. There is a nice survey recently on the Handbook of Personality. It's therefore possible to argue that neurotic people experience higher sensitivity to distance between aspiration and realization. What is the, you know, if you go too short on your aspiration, you feel threatened, you feel punished. And if you're neurotic, you get mad. Wait. Now, the opposite is true if you go higher on your aspiration, because, oh, thanks God, I achieved what I wanted. And since I know I'm highly neurotic, I will punish myself very much. The other case, it might be that if you go too short, you might react by overreacting, by being very happy that you avoided the threat of going too short on your aspiration. Right? Okay, that tells you everything. I can go away. What is a neurotic? Everybody is neurotic to some extent. I'm neurotic, Peter is neurotic, Shayantan is neurotic. Obviously, you know, to a different extent. We might be a bit more close to Woody Allen than James Bond. I don't know. There might be some wishful thinking going on. But I put these two guys here because it tells something very important in my view. It doesn't exist a zero neurotic individual. Okay? And honestly, I doubt that Woody Allen is as neurotic as he portrays himself. Okay? We are a bit here in between. All of us. It might be a bit closer to James Bond than to Woody Allen. I don't know. I leave with you this assessment, but that's more or less what we have. Okay. Neurotic. There is neuroticism everywhere, and neuroticism is an important feature. Okay. Imagine an individual with zero neuroticism will not survive. How many times James Bond must have been killed in the movies? Right. All the time, basically. If he's realistic, James Bond should have been dead. And obviously, if a zero neurotic individual will be dead, he will not be able to reproduce himself, as James Bond does. Well, on the other side, I don't think that highly neurotic guy will be able to reproduce himself either, okay? Somebody who is afraid of everything, even going out from the window, okay? So, I think nature endowed us with some reasonably good level of neuroticism. We need a bit of that. Maybe not too much, but we need a bit of that. So, just to say, neuroticism is an important element, and this is thanks to neuroticism we are surviving. Now, why we found we have first thing our relationship, okay? This. Then we have our definition of neuroticism. Like better this. Now, given our statistical correlations and our definition of neuroticism, let's try to build the model I've been talking to you before. Realized income depends on aspiration. Again, if I'm rich, if I work in the city, it's likely that I was very ambitious to begin with. Aspirations is affected by traits. The more open I am, the more extrovert I am because I enjoy reward, the more conscious I am because I do things properly. Income increase with aspiration, like I said. Exposed happiness, exposed. I look at myself, my achievement. Happiness depends on income, and negatively on the gap between aspired and realized income. I look at myself, I see how much I have on my bank account, the car I have got. That's not enough. I also see what I have with respect to what I wanted to have, or what I was expecting to have, or what Mr. and Mrs. Jones have got. The two models can be adapted. You can think in this terms of aspiration as something what you expect, but you can think in aspiration something that is formed by looking at Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Okay? The two things can be together. Okay, ex post, I look at that, I look at myself, I look at what I wanted to be and what I am, and I formulate my life satisfaction report. This is the theory. The theory says, the theory I've shown you up to now, say that neuroticism modulates this difference. Okay, this is the model. We do it mathematically. We do a very, very complex number of equations that describe this model. And we try to estimate that. I know that there was not an audience for only economists, so I spare you the details on the equations. Okay? So but I'm trying to express these things only verbally, which in my view is even more difficult than showing equations. The problem with estimating seriously this model is the fact that you have three endogenous variables. Endogenous means that depends on something else, in our case the traits. Aspiration, income, and life satisfaction. However, aspiration is a latent variable. There are some surveys that ask people how much you want to make, but that's not those one. And in any case, it would be a difficult assessment. So it's a latent variable. This is the problem of estimating such a model. We had to cope with that. We don't have the aspiration variable. We had to cope with it. Okay? And this is the main problem. Personality and other control variables taken as exogenous, as I said. Now, what do we do? I spare you the details, but in practice, we had three equations. As many as endogenous variable: aspiration, income, and happiness. Aspiration was depending on our trait, on our personality, and our age, our income last year. Income is depending on our level of motivation, therefore on personality. Happiness, life satisfaction, is depending on these two things: how much money I've got, and the difference between what I got and what I want. Okay? These are the three equations of the model. Unfortunately, aspiration is not there, so we have to take it away. We have to solve aspiration by income and plug this in the model. So instead of having three equations, we have only two equations with a lot of bias. Okay? But this bias is systematic in the sense we know the direction of this bias. It's not perfect, but that's the best thing we could do. Now, why was important to do this? Because the parameter, although now they are a bit biased because some parameter depends on different equation altogether, they can still tell us something. And again, I'm not showing you what the parameters say, but I'm giving you an intuitive idea. So as I said, instead of having three equations, now we have a system with two equations. This one is life satisfaction, depending on income square, neuroticism, like we said before, because it's the difference and so on. And the second equation is an equation of income. What are the determinants of income? Okay. First thing, if we look at that, traits have an impact on income. They are correlated at least. The more agreeable you are, less competitive you are, the poorer you are. Conscientiousness is a bit puzzling, but I'll come back on that, because why is negative or not significant should be positive, I'll come back. Openness is positive. You look for new. You're trying not to stop. You go ahead, you explore other possibility of making money, entrepreneurial spirit. Extraversion is positive in the UK, it's not positive in Germany, so I don't know, a bit worrying, but yeah, I don't know, worrying for Germans, but I don't know. It should be, if there is any German, maybe we can make sense of that, but I think it's, I don't know why this is true. Neuroticism, negative. Why is negative neuroticism? Well, this is expected. Imagine if you are somebody who is extremely afraid of making loss. Well, you don't take too many risks, right? Education is positive. Income, obviously, yesterday is positive. Why conscientiousness is such a strange thing is because education takes away. Explain a lot. If you take away education, conscientiousness becomes positive. That's a problem. There is more multicollinearity. So, fine. This is the first stage. Let's bring everything in this, and we find again our result. Neuroticism heavily interact with income into income square. Once you take away this, there is little left. What is left can be observed from this graph, where I plotted simply the coefficient that I found in the regression. These are again, in this case it's reversed, sorry. These are again low neurotic people. These are highly neurotic people. And we have found again that pattern we found before with the normal OLS regression. Highly neurotic people tend to overreact to an increase in income. Here is the life satisfaction is income, life satisfaction income, okay? Highly neurotic people, this is for Germany, this is for UK. But, you know, it looks a bit different, but it's not. It's qualitatively very similar. What does it mean? It means that highly neurotic people tend to overreact or react more than low neurotic people to income once they are poorer in this region. And they underreact when they are rich in that region. This is true here as well. Although here you have this further complication that the relationship is not anymore concave, become convex for low neurotic. But it's still true, you see. Here you overreact, the slope of this is bigger than that. Here you underreact, so your slope of this is lower than that. Okay? So even for UK people, we have a similar pattern. Okay? So that's the way, that thanks to the fact that we have built such a complex, we have found that the only way to make sense of this is that the parameter have to be such that there is this overreaction, overshooting for poorer and undershooting for rich. Let me finish. Personality traits influence the income and the way life satisfaction depends on income. Higher neuroticism is associated with the decline on happiness at high income and an increase on lower income. A simple model that I've shown you, motivation, increase income, okay? So can make sense of this result if you consider this overshooting and undershooting. Sample model finds support in the data and provide a approximate explanation of this finding. I will conclude with this. I didn't know that sentence. The observer, there was an article on the Observer on this paper. And then the internet followed, and I found so many interesting things. Like, I didn't know that, okay? But this I found on internet. Somebody who commenting on my paper mentioned this quote directly from Woody Allen. I didn't know that, okay? So it was really, really something I found on internet. It's pretty interesting. So Woody Allen is somebody, when I was younger, I made half of the salary. I don't know, I kept thinking, if I could just make twice as much money, I prefer. It got like I met with him, but then I say I want more. Okay? So it seems a normal pattern for a neurotic, assuming that Woody Allen is truly neurotic, which might not be, but who knows.